AITA for refusing to go to the store when my significant other cooks meals for me. Then he started demanding payment for cooking and said that I should cook for myself. I, 35F, have been living with my significant other, 38M, for a little over a year now. We moved in together after dating for a while, and the arrangements seemed to make sense at the time. We live in a home with his mother and our daughter, who is the teen. In many ways, our household functions pretty smoothly. We each have roles we fill, and for the most part, we found a routine, but there's one recurring issue that is starting to feel less like a quirky disagreement and more like something deeper and more hurtful. My partner has always been particular about food. He loves to cook, and honestly, he's pretty good at it. He has specific stores he likes to shop at, brands he's loyal to, and certain methods he uses while preparing food. So, early on in our relationship, it became clear that he would be the primary cook in the house. I didn't mind this at all. He enjoys it, he's picky about it, and I figured, well, if someone is that passionate about food, let them take the reins. I cook on occasion and contribute when we order out. I also give him money toward bills, always a bit extra so that he can apply it to groceries or kitchen stuff. I've always considered that a fair contribution. What I do consistently, however, is clean the kitchen every night. Every single time he cooks, I am the one wiping counters, scrubbing pans, reorganizing spices and utensils, cleaning the stove top, throwing out scraps, and putting away whatever he left behind. And he leaves behind a lot. He's one of those cooks who uses nearly every surface, every knife, every spice jar, and never cleans as he goes. By the time dinner is served, the kitchen looks like a bomb went off. I clean it without complaining, it's part of the unspoken agreement we each have. Our strengths and preferences are different, and I'm happy to support his love of cooking by making sure the kitchen doesn't stay a mess. But here's where things start to feel unfair. Despite being the self-declared planner of meals, despite waking up in the morning already thinking about what he's going to cook for dinner, he has this chronic habit of forgetting a key ingredient. And not just once in a while, almost every single time. He can plan a dish at 10 o'clock in the morning, but when it comes time to cook around 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the evening, he'll suddenly realize, oh, we don't have the noodles, or I forgot the tomato paste, or we're out of eggs. And who is the one he turns to every single time to run to the store at the last minute? Me. It never fails. He'll be halfway through prepping something or sometimes not even started, and he'll call out from the kitchen asking me to drop what I'm doing and go to the store. Sometimes it's when I'm working on a project, sometimes I'm just trying to unwind from a long day, sometimes I'm getting our daughter ready for bed, or finally having a moment of peace. But no matter what I'm doing, he expects me to grab my keys and leave immediately. When I push back, even gently, when I say something like, "You've been planning this meal since this morning. Why didn't you check earlier if we had everything?" Or "I asked you yesterday if you needed anything for dinner," his response is never understanding. He'll accuse me of being lazy, say I'm not being helpful, or tell me that I'm making a big deal out of something small. He'll say running to the store for 10 minutes isn't that hard. It doesn't matter if I've been cleaning all day or working late or just want a moment to breathe. If I don't immediately comply, I'm the problem. And it's not just regular evenings, holidays are worse. Every year, without fail, I make it a point to ask him for days in advance if he needs anything from the store. I remind him repeatedly that the stores will be closed or extremely busy the day of. I ask him to make a list every single time. He insists that he's got it covered, says, "Nope, we're good," every day leading up to the holiday. And then, without fail, Thanksgiving morning, Christmas afternoon, or right before a birthday dinner, he'll suddenly realize we're missing 3 or 4 critical items, not extras, but essentials. The kind of things you can't just skip or substitute. So guess who gets sent out scrambling to find an open store or navigating packed aisles on a holiday because he forgot parsley, or brown sugar, or baking powder? Me. And when I ask why he didn't mention it earlier when I gave him every chance to plan ahead, he deflects or blames me for not double-checking the pantry myself. At first, I thought it was just forgetfulness. I even tried to help him stay on track by creating a shared grocery list, checking in with him daily, offering to do the shopping myself if he'd just tell me what we need. But now I'm starting to feel like it's something else entirely. It's like I have to earn the right to enjoy the meal. Like, if I'm not running to the store, doing the cleanup, or being available on demand, then I haven't contributed enough. And that's hurtful, because I do contribute. I do a lot for our home, for our daughter, and for him. I've told him repeatedly all I want is for him to be thoughtful about my time, to respect that I also have things to do, that it's not fair for me to have to be on standby every night, waiting to see if he needs something last minute. That good planning isn't too much to ask. But the conversation always turns into him saying I'm just being negative or difficult, or that I'm ungrateful for his cooking. I love that he wants to feed the family. I appreciate the effort he puts into meals, but I can't shake the feeling that he's using this last-minute scramble as a way to control the dynamic. Like, you want to eat? You better be ready to hustle. And maybe that sounds dramatic, but it's starting to feel personal. So now I'm asking, am I the asshole for saying no when he asks me to run out for ingredients he forgot, even though he's the one doing the cooking? Am I wrong for being frustrated with this ongoing pattern of poor planning and then blaming me when I don't drop everything to fix it? Is it unreasonable to ask for a little more consideration of my time and energy? Because I'm tired of feeling like a bad partner when all I really want is for my time and contributions to be respected. Underscore 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 underscore. Update: one of these situations happened again last Friday. We were settling into our evening routine. It had been a long week for everyone. Our daughter, Lily, had a big project due for school and had been working on it all week. I had promised her that Friday evening would be our final push to get it polished, printing out her poster, organizing her index cards, reviewing her presentation. She had worked so hard, and I wanted to be there to support her and ease her anxiety. I had set aside that time intentionally. I even let Mark know earlier in the day that I would be tied up with Lily for a bit in the evening just so he had a heads up that I wouldn't be available to do any errands. Around 6:30, I heard the familiar clatter of pots and pans in a kitchen. Mark had decided to make his famous lasagna. I say famous with some sarcasm, not because it's not good. It is, but because he talks about it like it's the centerpiece of our household identity. He acts like he's preparing a culinary masterpiece for royalty every time he makes it. There's always this air of reverence around it, like we should all feel grateful for the effort, and it's always the same routine, dramatic sighs, over-the-top commentary about how much work it is, and of course, the inevitable forgotten ingredient. Right on cue, I heard his voice echo from the kitchen asking if I could just run out real quick. I didn't even have to ask what it was: mozzarella, the one thing you cannot forget when you're making lasagna, and yet somehow, he had. I told him I couldn't go. I was right in the middle of helping Lily print and assemble her project board. She needed my guidance, she was asking me questions, and we were in the groove. I figured that would be enough of a reason for any reasonable person to say, "All right, no worries, I'll figure it out." But instead of the usual sigh or passive-aggressive silence, things took a weirder turn. He came around the corner with that look, the one that tells me he's already decided I'm in the wrong. But this time, instead of guilt-tripping me or throwing out a sarcastic remark, he said something I wasn't prepared for. He said that if I wasn't going to help, then I would need to cover his time and the cost of the meal. He told me $50 should be fair for the trip and the lasagna. At first, I thought he was joking. Who says that to their partner? I actually laughed, waiting for the punchline. But there was no smile, no wink, no chuckle. He was dead serious. He said that since he was doing all the work and I was refusing to help, then it was only fair that I compensate him. He even added that he had to go out of his way now, so really, $50 was a bargain. I was stunned. This wasn't a request anymore, it was a transaction. Our relationship, which is supposed to be built on love and mutual respect, had been reduced to dollar amounts. This wasn't a conversation between partners. This was a charge, a penalty, a punishment disguised as fairness. He was talking to me like I was a customer who had inconvenienced him, not someone who lives with him, contributes financially, supports him, cleans up after him, and co-parents a teenager with him. I wanted to argue. I wanted to call him out right then and there and ask what the hell he thought he was doing. I wanted to remind him that I give him extra money every time I contribute toward bills to help cover groceries and meal costs. I wanted to remind him that I clean the kitchen every single night after he destroys it with his elaborate dinners. I wanted to scream that I had been planning all day to help our daughter with her project because that mattered to me. But I looked over at Lily. She was focused on cutting out some colored construction paper for her board, completely unaware of the absurd drama unfolding behind her, and I knew. I knew that if I engaged, if I made this into the argument it deserved to be, it would become a whole thing: tension, raised voices, accusations, and Lily didn't need that, not when she was already stressed about school. Not when she had worked so hard and needed calm support and presence. So instead, I pulled out my phone, I opened Venmo, and I sent him the $50. I felt sick, But I didn't want to escalate things in front of Lily, so I quietly Venmo'd him the $50. Update: 2 weeks later, it happened again. It was a Tuesday, and we were having one of those rare peaceful evenings where everything in the house felt still. No arguments, no messes, no school crises. Lily was in her room FaceTiming a friend about an upcoming science fair, and I was curled up on the couch reading a book I'd been trying to finish for months. The house was clean, the lights were low, and it was quiet. I had finally found a sliver of time for myself, and I was trying to savor it. Mark was in the kitchen, which usually meant we were in for one of his dramatic performances, what I call his culinary theater. That night was taco night, one of his self-proclaimed specialties. I had heard him rummaging through the fridge earlier, muttering to himself, but I tried not to pay it much mind. I figured, as always, he had things under control, or at least I was determined not to be pulled into another last-minute errand. But then I heard the footsteps. He came into the living room with that unmistakable energy, the mixture of performative frustration and manufactured martyrdom that always precedes a request disguised as an ultimatum. He stood there, arms crossed, and with a tone that was more smug than frustrated, he said, "Unless you want to go grab the stuff, it's going to be $50 again." Avocados and tortillas, that was what we were missing. Not exactly obscure items and certainly not expensive, but this was becoming a pattern, a twisted little game. I was still stunned from the first time, still trying to wrap my head around how our relationship had morphed into this transactional mess. I had hoped, in some naive part of me, that it had just been a one-time lapse in judgment, that he would feel ridiculous about it later and realize how absurd it was to charge his partner for a home-cooked meal. But now, here he was again, not even trying to pretend it was a joke, not even trying to soften it. This time, though, I didn't cave. I stayed seated on the couch, my book still open in my lap, and I looked up at him and said calmly that I wasn't paying him to cook. I said it without anger, without sarcasm, just the truth. I told him that I contribute to groceries, that I clean up every night, and that I support him in 100 different ways every week. I said I wouldn't be handing over money just because he didn't feel like making a grocery list earlier in the day. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. But I could see it in his face, that irritation, that quiet simmering contempt that's almost worse than yelling. He said I had made it clear that I didn't want to help, so he wouldn't be cooking for me anymore. Then he turned around and went back into the kitchen. I stayed on the couch. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised. I was just disappointed. I kept reading, or at least pretending to. A few minutes later, I heard him plating up the food. The smell of seasoned beef and grilled onions drifted into the living room. I heard the soft clinking of dishes and his mother laughing lightly at something he said. Then Lily called out something cheerful, probably thanking him for dinner, and then nothing. Silence. No plate for me. No hey, tacos are ready. Just silence. When I eventually walked into the kitchen, there were no tacos left. Not a tortilla, not a crumb, just a few greasy pans and a cutting board smeared with avocado. He had served tacos to Lily and his mother and very deliberately left me out. Not even a token plate in the microwave. Not even a gesture. Just omission. I didn't say a word. I didn't sigh or roll my eyes or try to guilt-trip him into acknowledging it. I just quietly made myself a sandwich and sat back down in the dining room, chewing slowly while they finished dinner. It wasn't about the tacos. I wasn't upset about missing a meal. I was grieving something else entirely. I was grieving the erosion of care, the slow unraveling of respect, the intimacy we used to have, the shared jokes, the mutual generosity. The unspoken rhythms of life together had been replaced by pettiness and scorekeeping. We weren't partners anymore. We were housemates with ledgers, each transaction a test, each request a minefield. He had made it clear. If I didn't comply, I didn't eat. If I didn't run to the store, I owed him cash. Love had conditions now. Kindness had a price tag, and that crushed me in a way I didn't know how to express. I sat there chewing my sandwich, staring at the empty table where the tacos had been, and I wasn't sad about missing tacos. I was heartbroken over how petty and conditional things had become. That night was a turning point. After Lily had gone to bed and the house had settled into its usual quiet hum, I sat on the edge of our bed, gathering the words I knew I needed to say. I didn't want to hold on to the hurt anymore. I didn't want another layer of resentment to form and harden inside me, waiting to surface the next time we clashed. So, I asked Mark to sit down with me. He looked tired, but to his credit, he didn't push back. He followed me to the living room, and for the first time in what felt like months, we sat together without distractions, without food, without tension lingering in the air, just silence and space to talk. I started slowly, careful not to come from a place of anger, because what I really felt was sadness. I told him everything, how disrespected I had felt, how deeply hurt I was, being treated more like an employee or a house guest than a partner. I reminded him of the countless nights I had cleaned the kitchen top to bottom without a single complaint, how I had always been generous with money, never questioning the groceries or the meals, even throwing in an extra when bills were tight. I told him how I had always run those last-minute errands, not because I had to, but because I cared, because I wanted to help him succeed at something he was passionate about, because I loved him. But lately, those errands felt less like support and more like a test. I was being set up to fail, like I was being evaluated for effort, and when I didn't pass his unspoken criteria, I was punished, either by guilt trips, passive-aggressive silence, or worst of all, literal price tags. I said I didn't sign up to pay for meals in a home we both share with a child we both raise, a life we both built. And if he saw his time, his energy, and his effort as something that required compensation from me, then we had a much deeper issue than forgotten tortillas. To his credit, he listened. Really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't roll his eyes or launch into defensiveness. He just sat there, nodding slowly now and then, the gears clearly turning in his mind. When I finished, the silence hung heavy between us, and for a moment, I wondered if he would just say something dismissive to end the conversation. But instead, he sighed and admitted that he hadn't realized how transactional and manipulative it had become. He said he thought he was making a point, that he wanted me to understand how frustrating it was when I said no to helping, how alone he felt in the process sometimes. But even he had to acknowledge that turning dinner into a business transaction wasn't the way to fix that. We talked for a long time, probably longer than we had in months. We unpacked things that had been building under the surface, the communication breakdowns, the quiet assumptions, the emotional labor that often goes on unseen. I explained how the small invisible tasks were stacking up on my side of the equation, managing Lily's school schedules, keeping track of appointments, doing the laundry, cleaning up after every meal, trying to create calm in a household that often felt chaotic. And I told him how disheartened I felt having to justify why I deserved a plate of food in my own home. He listened to all of it, and in return, he shared some of his own frustrations, not in a way that deflected blame, but honestly. He felt pressure to always be the one to cook, and sometimes he didn't want to ask for help because he didn't want to admit he needed it. He said he'd felt underappreciated at times, but he now realized that his way of expressing that, by creating this weird, toxic version of accountability, was harmful and isolating. It didn't bring us closer, it drove us further apart. Eventually, we reached a point where the air felt different, lighter, somehow. We weren't just airing grievances. We were finally seeing each other again, not as opponents locked in a domestic battle, but as partners who had lost their way a bit. So we decided to reset. We made a new plan together, and this time, it wasn't about compromise for the sake of peace. It was about building something more equal. From now on, grocery planning would be a shared responsibility. No more mental load falling on one person. We'd both sit down, go through the list, and double-check the pantry the day before cooking. If something was missing, we'd figure it out together. No more finger-pointing, no more scrambling, and absolutely no more ridiculous invoices. It was a household, not a restaurant. We also agreed to start switching roles once a week. One night a week, I would cook, and he would clean. It wasn't just about fairness. It was about respect, about understanding what the other person does, and feeling that effort firsthand. I was happy to step into the cooking role sometimes, not just to balance the chores, but to bring something new into our home, a shared experience, not a one-sided performance. The next day, something was different. He thanked me when I cleaned the kitchen. I thanked him when he picked up groceries. It was simple, but it felt sincere. He started asking before cooking if there was anything I wanted or needed. I started checking the fridge without being asked, just in case something slipped through the cracks. And that Friday night, we cooked together, side by side, laughing over spilled beans and arguing gently about spice levels. He chopped, I stirred. We made enchiladas together, and after dinner, he got up and started wiping the counters while I poured us both a drink. We're not perfect. There are still small moments of tension, still things we're working on, but this time it feels like we're actually working together. Like we're finally acting like a team.